Have a look at this order. It's too good to be true, right? I mean, there's gotta be a problem with it, right? Of course there was a problem with it, or I wouldn't be making this video. But I want to share how I turned what should have been a dud of an order into my payday, and how you can do it too. Before we get too far into the video, I want to tell a story about something that happened over this last summer that was literally out of this world. Unfortunately, it doesn't fit neatly into its own video, so I'm going to tell it at the end of this one. If you want to hear that story, stick around to the end. You know those days that just don't seem to go our way? The day I got that order was definitely one of those days. I was already feeling a bit cynical because I'd been out for hours and didn't have a whole lot to show for it. Like we all have, I hit the point of screw it and decided that it would be far more fun to drink beer and play video games with my buddy Salt. Shout out to Salt, wood tier. I stopped at a local grocery store to pick up a 6-pack of something delicious when I got the offer. Look, I've done this a long time, and I can spot a problem with an order from a mile away, and this was one such order. Being is that I was close, and I was still on a bit of a high from this order that had actually panned out the night before, I decided what the hell, and I drove over, figuring I'd roll the dice and seeing if my luck would continue. Quick side note, I have absolutely no idea what Wendy's have been doing differently recently, but more often than not, when I walk through the door, the orders are actually ready now, which is a complete 180 from just a year ago. Actually, matter of fact, let me know in the comments if you're experiencing the same thing in your markets. Alright, let's get back to me pulling up to Wendy's. Strike 1 was when the order was not in the to-go rack. Strikes 2 and 3 were when the employee told me that they never got the order, and several other drivers had shown up and left empty-handed. Shit. Right. Now, a situation like this is usually problematic because it's typically a complete waste of the driver's time by calling support. There is no more compensation for the driver when you show up to pick up an order that's already been picked up by somebody else or stolen, or if the restaurant's closed, or in my case, if they just never got the order to begin with. Now, some of you may think that this is a bad move on my part, but I did not bother calling support because I view it as a waste of my time. Hell, all they would have done was apologized, read me a script, and canceled the f***ing order, therefore doing away with my payday. Now, when an order gets jacked up in price like that, there's typically a good reason for it. The McDonald's order that I showed a few minutes ago got jacked up because at the time, the lobby was closed, they were drive-thru only, and it was about 30 cars deep. My guess is several drivers had shown up, said screw this, and unassigned the order. That order damn sure didn't start out paying that much. The same thing is true when a restaurant's closed. A driver accepts a high-paying order thinking that they're about to make some serious money. They drive to the store only to find it closed and then proceed to unassign it. And the final reason that an order might get jacked up in pay is if somebody stole the freaking thing. Basically, it's a vicious, never-ending cycle until somebody calls support, which we're going to come back to later in the video. But for now, I don't want to call those fuckers either, being as that they've done away with all compensation for the driver. It's so much easier to unassign the order and move on so I can keep earning money. Alright, let's get back to my Wendy's order and how I turned a problem into payday. The employee told me that several drivers had shown up for that order and ultimately all of them left empty-handed. But I wasn't in the mood. I did something I had never done before. I showed the employee the order on my phone and asked him how much it would cost to place it myself. He rang it up and told me it would be about $9. I said, yeah. Let's do it. Now, some of you may think that it is absolutely asinine to pay for the customer's order yourself, and generally you would be right. But let's look at the math on this one. Had I called support, they just would have canceled the order. But had I paid for it out of pocket, I would have paid $9 and gotten paid $38. Orders like that just don't come around very often, do they? Full disclosure, I don't know if it's against terms of service to do what I did. But also, full disclosure, I don't give a fuck if it was. It was a rare opportunity for the driver to get the long end of the stick for a change, and you bet your ass I took the win. I want to talk about a change that Uber quietly made not so long ago, but first, I want you to pause the video and let me know in the comments if you would have done the same thing if you were in my shoes. I'm of the opinion that it's not too long before Uber rolls their new rewards system out, everywhere. I believe that that's why I'm seeing orders in my market now that are going upwards of 45 miles away, paying like 20 cents a mile. If that wasn't crazy enough, now, every time you're unassigned for an order, regardless of circumstance or who unassigned you from it, your completion rate is going to take a hit. Restaurant closed? Tough shit. -1 for the completion rate. Maybe the order was stolen. Too bad. Your completion rate is going to take a hit. What if the restaurant never got the order? Well, you can call support and your completion rate is still going to take a hit. It's a common misconception that you can't get deactivated on Uber Eats for your completion rate. You absolutely can. They just don't publish the numbers, so it's at their sole discretion. Needless to say, I don't want my completion rate to take a hit, especially when a situation completely out of my control arises. I want to teach you a very simple trick so you never waste your time on a dud of an order again. But first, I want to have the call support versus don't call support debate. This is something that I've recently changed my opinion on. It used to be that when there was some sort of an issue that prevented an order from being picked up, I would call support and have the order canceled. But like I said, it's the way I used to do it. It used to be that if we called Uber, they would give us something like $2 or $3 for our time. But they don't do that anymore. They thank us and basically tell us to go fuck ourselves. Couple that with the fact that any unassigned for any reason is now going to count against you, and my motivation to call support has completely evaporated. Do I feel bad that another driver is probably going to accept the order and waste their time driving there? Yes, I do. But time is money, and I have to account for my bottom line. Alright, I realize that if every driver did what I do now and just said screw it when they get a dud of an order, that a hell of a lot more of us would waste our time far more often. So how can you prevent your time from being wasted? When you see an order popped up that's obviously artificially jacked up like these orders, just do yourself a favor and call the restaurant to see if they still have the order. It'll save you time, gas, and wear and tear on your car. I want to show you 2 orders that I got recently that I suspected a problem with. One of them was a dud, while the other one panned out. But I didn't waste my time on either one because I called both places and found one didn't exist while one did. Seriously, guys, that is such a simple way to avoid wasting time. But seriously, you should try it. It'll save you a lot of frustration in the long run, too. Alright, for those of you who stuck around to the end to hear the story, I'd like to thank you. So, this is something that, at the time, I thought nobody would ever believe me, so I could never talk about it. This happened on August 31st of this year, so just over this past summer. Now, a couple of weeks previous to this event happening, I saw something really awesome in the sky. Something I got to check off my bucket list. This is what I got to see, and that was a picture I took. So that was the first time I had seen the Northern Lights, and I've actually seen it once since then. So, needless to say, my eyes, when I had been driving in the evening, had been going up to the sky more often. So I was out one evening, and I remember dropping off an order, and I was about to turn a corner at a stop sign, and I see what I thought was the top part of a crane, illuminated, kind of like out in the distance a little bit. And so I make my turn. And, you know, as I'm driving, the tree cover kind of dissipates a little bit. And I'm like, wait a second, that's not a crane. There's no base to it. What I saw was a string of white lights, individual white lights. There was probably 8 of them, maybe, roughly. They were, there was no amber lights, and they were pulsating. They weren't flashing, they were pulsating from left to right. So this was moving incredibly slowly. And so I've taken a couple of flying lessons over the past, in the past, and I've always been an aviation geek. So I know that it was not an airplane. There were no amber lights. They weren't flashing. They were pulsating. It definitely wasn't a helicopter. There was no noise, unlike that motorcycle that's driving past. No noise whatsoever. Completely silent, moving very slowly. So at this point, I'm just dumbfounded. I'm beside myself. I'm thinking I just saw a fucking UFO, and like I said, I'm like, nobody's ever gonna believe me. So I got a picture. This is that picture. Now you do have to zoom way in, which I'll do in editing for you, and the picture doesn't do it justice. I had to use a very long exposure because I was in a low light setting because it was night. So it didn't capture the individual lights, and it looks more just like a streak, but they were individual lights that I was seeing. And so I'm just like out of my mind at that point. I'm like, what the hell is going on? You know, I'm not one of those people who believes strongly in aliens one way or the other, or, you know, like I'm not that guy, but I'm open-minded, and I couldn't explain what I had just seen. So I'm driving back home, and I'm so distracted with what I had just seen that I actually ended up going the wrong way down a one-way. Fortunately, it was later into the evening on a residential road, so it wasn't a big deal. I ended up contacting a friend of mine. If you're one of those people who are just like hell-bent, yes, there's aliens, yes, you know, yes, UFOs visit us, turn off the video now. For the rest of you, I contacted a friend of mine who is really into like outer space and like anomalies and stuff like that. And I explained to him what I had just witnessed. And he asked a couple questions, and I answered them. And he said, is it possible that it could have been Starlink satellites? And I'm like, well, they were moving really slowly. I've seen satellites before, and they're typically like whizzing through space, and that's not what I had just seen. And he's like, well, no, they're really low in Earth's orbit, so they would be a lot slower. I was like, huh. So I bust out Google, and I look up if there's any way to tell when and where Starlink satellites are visible. And so I punch in, you know, my city and state, and sure enough, that's what I saw. So it was a string of Starlink satellites that were visible for about 4 or 5 minutes. So I just happened to look up right at the perfect moment to see them. But the UFO was a UFO for about 45 minutes, and then it just became a FO, or flying object, or series of flying objects. So yeah, for about 45 minutes there, I was convinced I saw a UFO, and that I'd never be able to tell that story. But now it's just humorous and lighthearted. So that was yeah. That was that was my UFO story. So again, thank you for sticking around to the end of the video. If you haven't done so yet, please do consider pressing the like button and subscribing to my channel. My name is Zach. Take care.